Right now, I want to bring you back to Baton Rouge, where the prosecutor there has decided not to file any charges against police officers involved in Alton Sterling's death. Police shot him 6 times outside of a convenience store 2 years ago in the summertime, and they found a gun on him. And that's why police said they opened fire. I want to go back to this press conference in Baton Rouge. Alton Sterling's family is very emotional, very upset at the prosecutor for not filing charges against this police officer. Here's part of what they had to say.
When the Ku Klux Klan infiltrates law enforcement, they become the Ku Klux Klan with a license to kill. Blaine Salamone is the Ku Klux Klan, and he murdered Alton Sterling. The video shows it. Everybody else pussyfooting around through the tulips. We came to let you know that when the Ku Klux Klan infiltrates law enforcement, they become the Ku Klux Klan with a license to kill. There are race soldiers all across America, and the head wizard sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, giving them the okay to murder and commit brutality on blacks. Point blank.
All right, very emotional comments from the family of Alton Sterling. The Louisiana Attorney General decided not to file charges against these officers. He said because officers actually tased Alton Sterling twice. They asked him to lie on the ground and put his hands behind his back. He refused to obey police, and only when police were forced to tackle him, they say, did they force him to the ground, and they found that gun on Alton Sterling. And police say they were forced to fire because they didn't know what Alton Sterling would do. But as you can see, this isn't over yet. Emotions are high, and it continues, and we'll keep you posted. I got to take a break. We'll be back with much more on Across America. And California's Attorney General is about to hold a news conference on the death of 22-year-old Stephon Clark. This afternoon, Black Lives Matter is organizing a protest outside the Sacramento District Attorney's office. The group is demanding officers be charged in Stephon Clark's shooting. Opinion Nation, I ask you, if the Parkland shooting had happened in a majority black school or low-income neighborhood, would we be as outraged about gun violence? Would hundreds of thousands of people have marched on Washington and around the country? So the question today is our outrage about gun violence racist? Just ask an 11-year-old girl.
I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African-American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper. I represent the African-American women who are victims of gun violence, who are simply statistics instead of vibrant, beautiful girls full of potential. For far too long, these names, these black girls and women, have been just numbers. I'm here to say never again for those girls too.
She's 11. Her name is Naomi Wadler. She spoke for just 3 minutes at the March for Our Lives rally in D.C. over the weekend, and her words resonated. Here's what she's talking about. Huffman High School. Never heard of it, right? How about Cortland Arrington? No? Well, Arrington, who, as you can see, is African-American, was shot dead at Huffman High School in Birmingham, Alabama, not 10 years ago, not 1 month ago, but on March 7th. Arrington is not the only black woman to fall, not by a long shot. The CDC found that black women have the highest rate of homicide than any racial group in the United States. And yet there are no massive nationwide marches denouncing their deaths. But in Parkland, yes. Is it because white kids are leading the charge? Even they wonder.
There is a lot of racial disparity in the way that this is covered. If this happened in a place of a lower socioeconomic status or a place where like a black community, no matter how well those people spoke, I don't think the media would cover it the same.
So let's talk about this. Joining me now is senior law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes, Tanya Faison from Black Lives Matter Sacramento, and Patrice Cullors, founder of Black Lives Matter. Welcome to all of you. Tanya, I want to start with you because of what's happening in Sacramento right now, involving a police-involved shooting. And I just want to pose that question to you. Are we racist when it comes to gun violence?
I would say definitely yes. There's been gun violence in black communities, and there's also been gun violence to black communities by the police, and there's no uproar over it.
But Patrice, we hear President Trump mention Chicago all the time, and we know there's a problem with shootings in black communities in the city of Chicago.
Yes, there's been an issue with gun violence in Chicago and in many black communities across the country. And unfortunately, Donald Trump, many of us call him 45, uses it as a cheap ploy for his own political agenda. But those same communities aren't receiving the resources they deserve. They aren't receiving the kind of care and dignity they deserve. And there's so many community members inside of Chicago, including our own Black Lives Matter chapter, that have been working on the front lines of trying to change the culture so that black young people can thrive in that city.
Tom, you've been an investigator for a very long time. Do you think that America cares as much when an African American dies of gun violence? You know, cares as much as they do when a white person is killed?
Well, Carol, I think the problem is that, you know, if we talk about Chicago again, is that the violence is so prolific and has been that way for several years. And most of the shooters are black. Most of the victims are black. And I think that, you know, when the issue is raised to try to stop that violence, with more police action, and even parents often calling for more police in their communities instead of downtown protecting tourists. And I think that then it's met with charges of racism, and we don't want the police using heavy-handed tactics or stop and frisk or issues like that in our community. So there is, I think, a difference in almost an expectation that, yes, some of these communities are going to have a higher amount of violence than other communities, and it doesn't capture the attention that it really should.
So, Tanya, I can hear some of my viewers saying, look, you guys could, like, organize a huge, giant march on Washington to protest violence in black communities, but we don't see that. Why?
Well, there are huge marches all over the country protesting violence in black communities. And then there's also marches protesting the violence that's brought into black communities. So that is happening. If somebody's saying that, they're not informed.
And Patrice, I wanted to ask you, because you were at the March for Our Lives in Washington, is that right?
No, I was
You were not. Were you, Tanya? Were you there?
No,
I
was
was
not.
marching in Sacramento for Stephen Clark.
Well,
but we had
but you paid attention. I'm sure you did.
Yeah,
So
and we had multiple chapters that were at the March for Our Lives.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there were Black Lives Matter people there.
Exactly.
And the reason I want to point that out
Yes.
is because it seemed as an outsider that march was inclusive. Did you feel that way?
Well, I think from the very beginning of the Parkland shooting and the coverage that they received, we were grateful that these children were receiving this coverage. And there has been an intervention made around why is it that this school, this mostly white school, is receiving this coverage, and black young people have been fighting gun violence for literally decades and had received very little. And so in a lot of ways, the Parkland students listened to that intervention, and you've heard it in their talking points. You've heard them name, you know, the disparity. So we had Black Lives Matter LA chapter members, Black Lives Matter DC and Chicago, all black youth who've been fighting gun violence, including a young woman named Tendiwe Abdullah from Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, who wrote an article for Bustle naming gun violence in the communities and also challenging what policies might come out of this moment that will impact mostly black communities. We see when mass shootings happen in mostly white suburban neighborhoods, an upsurge of policing in communities of color and specifically schools of color. LAUSD, where we're at right now, Los Angeles Unified School District, is 90% people of color. And whenever there's a mass shooting in a white community, we get the charge from LAUSD board members to bring in more police. And that's actually, that's not equivalent. That's not what we should be equating right now.
Well, but I understand why that is, Tom, because, of course, authorities are concerned about violence in all schools when a mass shooting happens in one school anywhere in the country.
Well, one of the most horrific shootings, of course, go back to, you know, the Sandy Hook Elementary School, 4- and 5-year-olds being gunned down with an AR-15, as well as, I think, 6 faculty members. And every victim, I believe, was white in that case. It received a great deal of attention for a while. It received just about no legislative changes or anything. So you did have, you know, a horrific attack within a white community and a white school within a white community. So I think that, you know, it was unusual. It got a great deal of attention, as did the shooting in Florida, which it deserved. But I'm not sure it's just a racial issue in terms of who the victims are.
Yeah, Tanya, and Tom is right. You know, we've covered so many mass shootings in schools across the country, and nothing much happens. Maybe this will be different because maybe people of all colors are joining together, young people, to force change. Tanya?
Most likely, I'm hoping that we'll see change. It's hard to tell because we've been fighting for change for so long, and law enforcement seems to be killing us on a regular basis, especially in Sacramento. We've been fighting for a number of people since 2015. We had 1 death in 2015, 3 in 2016, and we're fighting for about 7 people that were killed by law enforcement in Sacramento or from Sacramento in 2017. And then Stefan is our first of this year.
Okay, so Tanya, I'm going to ask you to pause because I'm just monitoring. This is California's Attorney General, and he's going to be talking about the shooting in Sacramento and the death of Stefan Clark, who was shot at 20 times by police. He died. Let's listen.
I want to especially extend a welcome and a note of gratitude to all the community leaders who are here with us as well. As you can see, for Sacramento, this is an important occasion to talk about some important things. And so we thank everyone who is here with us today. Let me give you a quick run of show so you have a sense of how we're going to conduct this press conference. I'm going to actually turn this over in a moment to Chief Hahn with the Sacramento Police Department, and then he'll turn it back over to me. And then we'll have the following individuals who will speak as well. We have the Mayor of the City of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg. We have the District Attorney for the County of Sacramento, Anne Marie Schubert. We have Pastor Anthony Sadler, Pastor Bob Ballion, Dr. Ollie Mack, and Mr. Mark Havener, who will speak. I hope you will give each and every speaker your attention, and afterwards we'll take questions. Today is all about building and strengthening respect and trust between our communities and the men and women of law enforcement who are there to protect us. I believe that's what's essential to have and to achieve true and lasting public safety for our neighbors and for our peace officers. With that in mind, it's appropriate to ask, as I said earlier, Chief Daniel Hahn of the Sacramento Police Department to lead us in announcing today's decision. So at this stage, let me turn the microphone over to Chief Daniel Hahn.
Good morning. I'd first like to thank Attorney General Becerra. I appreciate your willingness to help our city and our community during this critical time and on this significant issue. On February 18th, our city experienced a tragedy that no one wants to see or experience, March. As our city's police chief, who has lived in this community my entire life, I'm dedicated to making sure that we gather all the facts, conduct a thorough investigation, and promise we will continue to be transparent throughout the process. Our community deserves nothing less. I also promise, regardless of the final outcome of this investigation, we will explore and implement ways to better serve our community and find ways to prevent this sort of tragedy in our city. That is my promise as this city's police chief and a lifelong member. It is the same process that we announce. It is in this same process that we announce the addition of the State Department of Justice being part of this investigation. I have complete confidence in the detectives in my department to accurately and impartially and thoroughly investigate this tragic incident. But due to the nature of this investigation, the extremely high emotions, anger, and hurt in our city, I felt it was the best interest of our entire community, including the members of our police department, to ask the Attorney General to be an independent part of this investigation. And Mr. Becerra agreed to be that independent body. Our city is at a critical point right now, and I believe this will help build faith and confidence in the investigation from our community. The Sacramento Police Department will provide full access and involvement for the Department of Justice investigators during the entire investigation. They will also provide an independent review of our policies and our training as it relates to use of force. I again would like to thank our Attorney General for his dedication to the Sacramento community through his willingness to be an independent part of this investigation. I'd also like to speak to the recent events in our city. Protest has a rich and positive place in our nation's history and definitely in our state and our city's history. As the capital of California, we often see the rights of protesters exercised in our city. But as we have seen, I am concerned that as a community, we exercise calm over the coming weeks and months, and that we don't have any more tragedies, injuries, or property damage, as that does not help us move forward and improve the city for all people. It is with this in mind, I want to thank the leaders in our community that are here with us today, supporting our city and being safe, the fraternities, the sororities, and the pastors that are here today. I thank all of them for being engaged in ensuring that everyone in our city is safe and has the opportunity to thrive. Lastly, I want to ensure our community that the police department will continue to be transparent and continue to openly share information that we can regarding this investigation. We released body-worn camera and helicopter video in unprecedented fashion within 3 days because that was the right thing to do for our community. We provided updates on some of the evidence in the case as we obtained it, and we will continue to do so. We want to be a leader not only in our state, but our nation in regards to what partnerships with our community look like and what transparency looks like, because that is what's best for our Sacramento community. I would also like to thank the men and women of the Sacramento Police Department who have been working many long hours over the last week. They have shown tremendous professionalism, patience, and dedication to our city. They have truly provided a tremendous service to our city during this very trying time. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the Attorney General.
I thank and respect Chief Daniel Hahn, and quite honestly, I thank and respect everyone in the community who made this call possible for us to come together this way. The California Department of Justice will now step in and provide independent oversight of this investigation into the shooting of Stephon Clark. My team and I at the California Department of Justice will do everything in our power to ensure that this investigation is fair, thorough, and impartial. I also want to thank and respect Chief Hahn for agreeing that the California Department of Justice's involvement in this matter will extend to include a review of the policing policies, procedures, and practices at the Sacramento Police Department. Although we will continue to coordinate with the Sacramento Police Department, we will retain our independence as we conduct this review. Our independent oversight of the investigation and our separate review of the department will be based on the facts and the law. Nothing more, nothing less. At this time, it's hard to say much more than that about either assignment, because one involves an ongoing investigation and the other has yet to commence. But I can tell you this: we take our responsibility in full recognition of the importance of getting it right, because it's about respect and trust. It's about identifying ways to achieve public safety and safer outcomes in the future. The California Department of Justice is here to live up to its name. We work with law enforcement and communities across California every day, and we work to uphold justice every day. Today, we take another important step towards strengthening the respect and trust that we need to keep Californians safe. With that, let me now turn the microphone over to our mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg.
All right, we're going to jump out. I want to pose a question to Tanya Faison because she is the leader of Black Lives Matter Sacramento. So the state's going to open up an investigation into the police shooting of Stephon Clark. Is that enough for you?
No, not at all. The government shouldn't be monitoring the government. The people should be. We have a Sacramento Community Police Commission. It has absolutely no power, and they're the ones that need to have the power to subpoena information and to investigate, have civilian investigators. They're the ones. The community needs to be the one that oversees this.
So you want an independent investigation?
Completely independent. Completely independent.
Okay,
and then
so
also
hold that thought. I got to get a break in. We're gonna discuss this at length on the other side. I'll be right back. All right, back to our breaking news. California's Attorney General says his Justice Department will open up an investigation surrounding the circumstances of the death of Stephon Clark. Here's what we know about Clark's death. It happened on March 18th. Police respond to a call of someone breaking into cars. Police use a helicopter to locate Clark, and you can see the surveillance video if we roll the tape here. You can see the surveillance video where Clark jumps a fence. There he is running. The helicopter, the police helicopter above is following him. He ends up in his own grandmother's backyard. Officers converge on that house. Clark is in the backyard, and this is what happens next.
Show me your hands! Gun! 5-7 shots fired. Subject down. Show me your hands! See your hands!
Okay, so back with me now is senior law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes, Tanya Faison from Black Lives Matter Sacramento, and Patrisse Cullors, founder of Black Lives Matter. Tanya, I want to go back to you. You said that this Justice Department investigation is not enough. Why?
Because the community should be overseeing this. The government
So do you not trust any state official in the state of California to conduct a fair investigation?
No, I don't.
Why not?
No. Just because we've never gotten a fair investigation before. We've never gotten anything right before doing what we've been doing. So we need to do it differently. The community needs to oversee this. The people that pay the salaries of our police need to be the ones that oversee this.
Tom,
and then on top of that,
Tom, I'm going to put Tom in the hot seat because is Tanya being completely fair about this?
No, because, and the reason I would say that is if you go back to Rodney King in that incident, the officers were tried in the state of California and acquitted, but the FBI civil rights investigation, they were tried in federal court and sent to federal prison. You had the shooting of a family on the bridge during Hurricane Katrina aftermath in New Orleans. Officers, again, were convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison sentence. So there have been other cases. I commented on the air following the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago a couple of years ago, where he was shot twice, went to the ground, was lying still, and then the officer shot him 14 more times. And I said at the time, that the first two shots, you know, we can argue why those occurred, but the 14 coup de grace shots are going to result in that officer being put on trial for murder, and that happened. So in these cases where you have a subsequent investigation, I think that they have been fair, they've been thorough. You know, it doesn't always go the way people think they ought to go, but there have been many examples.
So I want to get this question in for Patrisse, Tom, if I may. So this doesn't appear to be a clear-cut case because police thought that Stephon Clark was committing crime. He ended up in this dark backyard. Police didn't know it was the grandmother's house. Okay. They say he reached into his pocket and pulled out the cell phone, which they thought was a gun. So is it a clear-cut case in your mind?
Well, I think what's interesting is that Attorney General Xavier Becerra said, there's facts and there's law, right? And that's what they're going to equally weigh. But the facts are that Stephon Clark was killed, shot at 20 times in his own grandmother's backyard. And the law says currently that California law enforcement can kill Black people and kill people with impunity. They have so much backing behind them. There's so much power that an officer is given. And I want to lift up Tanya's point about the people being able to oversee this, sure, the Attorney General is going to come into this. I think that's important, but there's something that's missing, which is where does the people get to decide what happens with law enforcement in our communities? And that, to me, is the tricky conversation.
Sadly, I have to end it there because my show's ended. But it's been a great conversation. Thanks to all of you. Tom Fuentes, Tanya Faison, Patrice Cullors. I'm Carol Costello. Thank you for watching Across America.